sit with that for a second, because tonight the man responsible for those numbers walks back into the stadium where he made them, not as a hero returning home, not for a ceremony, not for a guard of honour. He walks back in as the opposition. Victor Gyokeres is in Lisbon tonight as an Arsenal player wearing red and white, standing in the away end tunnel at the Estadio José Alvalade, the place where an entire city fell in love with him. And I genuinely do not know how to feel about this, because on one hand, this is the story, this is the tie, this is the moment that the Champions League was built for. The narrative writes itself. Man leaves club, man comes back, man tries to break their hearts. But on the other hand, there's a football match happening, and that football match matters enormously for Arsenal, for this season, for everything Arteta has been building. And I genuinely think that too many people are getting lost in the romance of this story. And not enough people are asking the real questions. So let's ask them. Right, if you're new here, my name is Amelia. I talk Arsenal, I talk tactics. I give you my honest thoughts, not what the media wants you to think, not the safe take, just what I actually believe when I watch this football club. If that's your thing, and clearly it is because you're still watching, subscribe, hit the bell, because I do this regularly. And if tonight goes the way I think it might, we're going to have a lot to talk about over the next week. Right, let's get into it. So where are we with Arsenal going into this game? 2 consecutive cup exits, Carabao Cup final, Manchester City, FA Cup quarter-final, Southampton, a championship club. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that, because I don't think sugarcoating it serves anyone. That Southampton result stung. It really stung. Not just because of the result itself, but because of what it looked like, the performance, the intensity, or the lack of it. The sense that something was slightly off, that the sharpness wasn't there, that the hunger for that particular game wasn't quite at the level it needed to be. And look, I know what some people will say, rotation, fatigue, long season, prioritization, and I understand all of that. But here's the thing. You can't walk into the Estadio José Alvalade against a side that hasn't lost at home in 20 games with that energy. You just can't. This is the Champions League quarter-final, first leg, away from home. Every single decision matters. But here's where I want to push back on the narrative that Arsenal are in freefall, because they're not. In the Champions League this season, unbeaten, all season, 8 wins from 8 in the league phase, 23 goals scored, 5-5 conceded across the entire UCL campaign. They beat Bayern Munich. They beat Inter Milan. They took Bayer Leverkusen apart over 2 legs. So which Arsenal shows up tonight? That's the question. And nobody can tell you for certain. Now, before we go any deeper into Arsenal, because we will, I need to talk about Sporting, because I feel like Sporting are being massively underestimated in this tie, and it's frustrating me. Everyone is focused on Gyokeres. Everyone is talking about the narrative. But this Sporting side, Rui Borges side, is genuinely dangerous. Do you know what they did in the round of 16? They lost the first leg to Bodo Glimt 3-0 away from home in Norway, 3-0 down. Most good teams don't come back from that. In Champions League knockout football, a 3-goal deficit is almost impossible to overturn. They became only the 5th team in Champions League history to do it. 5. In 30-something years of this competition, they came home to Alvalade. They won the second leg 5-0 in extra time. That is a psychological shift that cannot be measured in statistics. That group of players now genuinely believes they can do anything in front of their own fans. That belief, that momentum is a weapon, and I don't think Arsenal fully respect it yet, and they haven't lost at home in 20 consecutive matches. 20 across all competitions. They won every single one of their 5 Champions League home games at Alvalade this season. This is not a team you stroll into and assume 3 points. But here's the part nobody is really talking about, and this is where it gets interesting. Morten Hjulmand is suspended tonight. Now, if you don't know who Hjulmand is, he's Sporting's captain, their midfield anchor, the player who controls the tempo, breaks up attacks, organises the defensive shape, and basically allows their more creative players to express themselves with freedom. He's not just a player, he's a system, and without him, Sporting's midfield structure changes completely. They're likely going with Simons and Morita in the middle. And look, Morita is a decent player, capable, experienced, but he is not Hjulmand. Nobody in that squad is Hjulmand. Now think about what this means for Arsenal. Martin Odegaard in space is terrifying, genuinely terrifying. The man sees passes that don't exist yet, but he needs space to find. He needs that half-second extra, and Hjulmand is exactly the type of player who takes that half-second away. Without Hjulmand, Odegaard could have more room than he's had in any away Champions League game this season. And Declan Rice, who's back tonight, by the way, which is massive. Rice in a midfield with space to drive into. That is a completely different proposition. Tell me if I'm wrong here, but Hjulmand being out might be the single most important factor in this entire tie, more than the Gyokeres narrative, more than Saka being absent, more than home advantage. If Arsenal are clinical in the moments that open up through that midfield, this could be a very different game to what Sporting are expecting. Right, let's talk about what Arsenal are missing, because it matters. Bukayo Saka did not travel, neither did Timber, and I want to be honest about what that means, because I don't think brushing past it serves us. Saka on the right side of Arsenal is not just a goal threat, he's a pressure release. He's the player who, when everything gets tight and compact and complicated, you can find him on that right channel and he makes something happen. He wins fouls, he creates space. He's a constant reference point that defenders have to account for. Without him, that right side becomes a question mark. Noni Madueke gets the nod there. And look, I like Madueke. I think he's a talented player. But this is a Champions League quarter-final against a side that is ferocious in transition and has Francisco Trincão on the other side, who is absolutely electric right now. Trincão was player of the match in that Bodo Glimt comeback, 4 UCL goals and 2 assists this season, and he's going to be running directly at Christian Mosquera at right back, because Timber isn't here either. And that is a matchup I am watching very closely tonight, very closely. Mosquera is not a bad player, but he's young, he's relatively inexperienced at this level, and Trincão is the type of player who is going to test him with pace, with directness, with those little 1-2s in tight spaces. The first 15 minutes for Mosquera tonight are going to tell us a lot. Now I want to spend some time on Gyokeres properly, because this story deserves more than just a headline. 97 goals in 102 games, 2 consecutive Primeira Liga titles, the Portuguese Cup, back-to-back top scorer awards, back-to-back player of the year. He didn't just play well at Sporting, he defined an era there. Rui Borges himself said that Sporting, he defined an era there. Rui Borges himself said that. And the way he left, look, this is the part that gets complicated. He pushed his way out. He missed pre-season training to force the move. Sporting had to discipline him. It wasn't clear. It wasn't a mutual handshake and best wishes. And yet a poll of Sporting fans, Portuguese fans, asked directly, how will you receive him tonight? 52% said applause. 29% said it doesn't even matter. What's important is Luis Suarez. Only 20% said they'd boo him. And the Sporting captain, Maxi Araujo, said this, and I thought it was genuinely beautiful, actually. He said the group was happy for Victor, that he deserved it, that they were happy for his departure. That's not what you'd expect, and I think it tells you something about the culture at that club. About the way Gyokeres conducted himself in the dressing room, even if the exit got messy, but then you have Portuguese media. Abola, one of the biggest sports papers there, said Gyokeres returns with more restricted movements and less confidence than when he was at Sporting. And look, I don't fully agree with that, but I understand where it comes from. His start at Arsenal was slow, really slow. 3 goals in his first 10 games. There was a period where you could see him struggling with the physicality, the pace, the intensity of the Premier League, but then something clicked. He scored twice against Atletico Madrid in the UCL. He went on a run. He found his rhythm. 5 goals in his last 3 appearances for club and country, including a hat-trick for Sweden. He is coming into this match in the best form of his Arsenal career, and now he walks into the ground where he became a legend against the people who built him, and he has to prove that the move was right, that he belongs at this level, that the Premier League hasn't diminished him. This is where you find out what a player is made of. This is the moment. And here's something that genuinely fascinates me about this whole situation. Sporting's answer to losing Gyokeres is Luis Suarez, not the Liverpool one, the Colombian, 28 years old, came from Almeria, cost 23 million euros, and he has scored 33 goals in 42 games this season, 33. He told Arsenal, he told them publicly, that Sporting will face them without fear. And when someone asked him about replacing Gyokeres, he said, and I love this, he said, for any player to replace Victor is the most exciting challenge of his career, and he feels he is responding. That's not an answer of someone who is intimidated. That is an answer of someone who believes in himself deeply. 4 goals in his last 3 home Champions League matches. He's in form, he's confident, and he is a completely different type of striker to Gyokeres. This is important tactically. Gyokeres is a physical presence. He runs channels, holds the ball up, aerial duels, pressing from the front. Suarez is more mobile, more fluid, more combinational. He links with Trincão and Pedro Goncalves, Pote in a completely different way, more movement, more interchanging, and Gonçalo Inácio and Ousmane Diomande at centre-back have never faced Gyokeres in competitive football. They've trained with him, they know his game, but they've never had to deal with him on the other side. And that psychological dynamic, I think, is genuinely underexplored. Right, I want to ask you something direct. Drop this in the comments because I genuinely want to know. Do you think Gyokeres scores tonight against his old club in front of those fans? Because for me, and I've thought about this a lot, I think the emotion of the occasion either fires you up completely or it creates this strange paralysis where you're almost overthinking every touch, every movement because you want it so badly. And the way Gyokeres spoke about it, the way he said, once the whistle blows, football takes over. I want to believe that. I really do. But I've watched enough football to know that the mental side of a homecoming is never as simple as you plan for it to be. Scoring tonight would be one of the iconic moments of this entire Champions League campaign, and I think he knows that. And sometimes knowing something matters too much is the thing that makes it harder. Let's talk about what Arsenal need to do tactically, because this is the part I find most interesting going into this game. Arteta's system this season in Europe has been built on one thing above everything else: not conceding. 5 goals against in 10 games. That is a defensive record that should not be possible at this level of football. The way they do it is through structural discipline, compact lines, Rice as the shield, Ødegaard tucking in to create numerical superiority in midfield, wide players tracking back, everyone knowing their role. But tonight, 2 of those wide players, Saka and Timber, are gone, and the balance shifts. Here's my concern, and this is a real concern. Madueke on the right is not the defensive presence that Saka has become. Saka has evolved into one of the best two-way wide players in European football. His defensive work rate, the tracking back, the covering, the press triggers is a huge part of how Arsenal's shape holds together. Madueke is still learning that part of the game. And if Fresneda, Sporting's right back, gets forward with freedom tonight because Madueke isn't disciplined enough in his press triggers, that could open up channels for Trincão inside and Pote arriving late. That is a real vulnerability, and I'd be surprised if Rui Borges hasn't identified it. On the other hand, and here's the flip side, without Hjulmand, Arsenal's press in the middle third could be absolutely devastating. Think about this scenario. Sporting build from the back. Their centre-backs look for an out into midfield. Normally Hjulmand is there, this huge physical presence who receives, turns, protects. Without him, Morita and Simões are under more pressure. They're not as comfortable in tight spaces. If Rice and Ødegaard can press aggressively and force turnovers in that midfield zone, and Arsenal have the quality to do exactly that, the whole game opens up, counter-attacks, transitions. The kind of football Arsenal are actually very good at when they have the space to exploit. This is where it gets interesting because Arteta has a decision. Does he sit deep, protect, and try to nick a goal on the counter? Or does he push the press, try to win the ball high up the pitch and accept the risk that comes with that, given what's at stake, given the away disadvantage, given the home record Sporting have? My instinct says Arteta sets up to not lose first, earn the clean sheet, take a draw, come back to the Emirates with everything still to play for. And you know what? That's not cowardly. That's intelligent. A goalless draw tonight. And Arsenal are massive favourites going into the second leg. That's just reality. But here's the stat that cuts the other way. And it's the one that the media keeps ignoring. Arsenal have never won away against Portuguese opposition in European knockout football. Never. And I know what you're thinking, Amelia, that's a historical stat. It doesn't mean anything about tonight. And maybe you're right. Statistics don't play football. They don't score goals. They don't make tackles. But I think it matters as context. Because the history of this club in Lisbon specifically, Arsenal lost 5-1 here in the league phase last season's UCL. Arsenal won 5-1 here in the league phase last season's UCL. Arsenal won 5-1 here in the league phase last season's UCL. Arsenal lost 5-1 here in the league phase last season's UCL. Arsenal won 5-1 here in the league phase last season's UCL. Arsenal won 5-1 here in the league phase last season's UCL. Arsenal won 5-1 here in the league phase last season's UCL. Arsenal won 5-1 here in the league phase last season's UCL. Wait, sorry, no. Arsenal won 5-1 here in the league phase last season's UCL. Wait, sorry, no. Arsenal won 5-1 in November 2024. That was Arsenal winning, and Sporting have never beaten Arsenal in 7 previous meetings, not once. So you've got 2 completely contradictory historical trends. Arsenal can't win away against Portuguese clubs in knockout football, but Sporting have never beaten Arsenal, period. Something has to give tonight. One of those records ends. And that tension is what makes this tie so compelling, so genuinely compelling. This is not a one-sided story. This is not the obvious result that the win probability models are suggesting. 53% Arsenal, 21% Sporting. That feels too generous to Arsenal given the context. The home form, the Bodo Glimt comeback, the emotional energy of the Alvalade crowd tonight. The Gyokeres distraction, and I mean that in the nicest possible way, because even the most professional players are not immune to the atmosphere of something like this. The Saka and Timber absences, the 2 consecutive cup losses affecting confidence and rhythm. There are so many variables pulling in different directions, and this is why I love this sport, because for all the data and all the analysis and all the expected goals and all the tactical breakdowns, we genuinely don't know. Nobody knows, not tonight, not at this ground, not with this story. Right. I want to give you my actual prediction, my honest gut feeling. I think this goes one of 2 ways. Either Arsenal absorb the early pressure and Sporting will come at them early. The crowd will push them. The emotion of Gyokeres being there will create an electric atmosphere. Arsenal absorb it, stay compact, and then find the game on a counter through Trossard or Odegaard, picking something up in a pocket. 1-0 Arsenal. They take the away goal. The tie is essentially over before the second leg even starts. Or, and this is the scenario I think is more likely than people are giving credit for, Sporting's home energy combined with the chaos that comes from a high-press, high-tempo game creates a more open contest. Suarez and Trincão cause problems. Gyokeres has one of those games where the emotion either fires him or constrains him, and it ends 1-1 or 2-1 to one of the sides, with everything still alive for the second leg at the Emirates. For me, personally, I'm going 1-1. I think both teams score. I think Gyokeres scores, and I think it's going to be an absolute match. But genuinely, I want to hear your prediction. Drop it in the comments. After the game goes tonight, I'm going to go back through and see who called it. And look, whatever happens tonight, this match exists within a much bigger picture, a much bigger story. Arsenal are chasing a League and Champions League double this season. The quadruple died at Southampton, but the double still alive, still fully within reach. 9 points clear in the Premier League, only 5 goals conceded in 10 Champions League games. They've beaten Bayern, Inter, Leverkusen. This is a squad that has been built meticulously, painfully over years for exactly this moment. The trophy drought, the frustration, the near misses, the years of watching other clubs lift things. It all comes down to nights like tonight. And I know as an Arsenal fan, I know this feeling, the hope and the fear sitting right next to each other, the wanting it so badly that you can't quite watch, the superstitions, the rituals, the checking the phone every 5 minutes, even though the game hasn't started yet. We've been here before. We've had big European nights and not delivered. We've had moments where the squad looked ready and the results said otherwise. But this Arsenal squad, and I really mean this feels different. The UCL record this season is not an accident. You don't go unbeaten across 8 games against the best clubs in Europe by luck. That is quality, that is system, that is Arteta. And Gyokeres walking into Alvalade tonight, that might be the motivation that tips the balance. Because if there's one player on that pitch who has something to prove tonight, something deeply personal, it's him. And players with something to prove on a stage this big can be unstoppable, whatever tonight brings, however this goes. This is the kind of night that stays with you, that you remember years from now. Gyokeres walking out, the atmosphere, the noise, the Alvalade crowd looking at the man who used to be their player, now trying to end their Champions League dream. This is why we watch football. This is why we care. Right, I'm watching. I'll be back after the final whistle with a full reaction. I want to know your score predictions, your starting 11 thoughts, and whether you think Gyokeres is going to be the hero or the heartbreak tonight. Comment, let's talk. And if you haven't subscribed yet, genuinely, why not? I put everything into these videos and we've got a long run in to go through together. This is not the end of the season. This is the beginning of the good bit. Let's go. Come on, Arsenal.